How am I going to take care of you, little one? You are going a little bit higher than I would like. Hi, welcome to Attainable Green. I'm Jess, and today I'm going to share with you how to take care of Catasetums. Now, Catasetums are a genus of orchid that has a very distinct growing cycle. It has a very strong and fast growing phase, and it also has a distinct dormant phase. So I'm going to be talking about the care of the growing phase of Catasetums, and that is when you really need to watch and take care of these plants, because during the dormant phase, you really don't have to do too much to these plants. You just kind of let it sit, kind of like tulip bulbs or other tubers. So let's get started. For light, these plants can tolerate full sun as long as they're acclimated to the light. So once they emerge from dormancy, you just gradually increase the light levels until it can handle full sun conditions. These plants can tolerate very high light conditions, but if you don't have a full sun spot for these plants, that's totally fine. As long as these plants get about 6 to 8 hours of sunlight and some bright shade throughout the day, these plants will do fine. As for temperature, Catasetums like it very hot. So if you live in really warm climates with high temperatures, I think you're going to do great. The key to having high temperatures with these plants is you also have to have high humidity or a lot of hydration to keep these plants well watered so they don't dry out. So if you want a temperature range, I would say probably between 50 all the way up to 90 degrees Fahrenheit is where they do really well. Now you really want to hit between 70 to 90 degrees during its growing season, and as it cools down and goes to dormancy, it can handle slightly cooler temperatures as long as there is less watering and less moisture in the root system. Now humidity is really key for these plants because they are really susceptible to spider mites. So you really want to keep the humidity between 50% and up. During drier seasons and drier periods of time, just make sure you keep these plants well watered, spray or mist the foliage, just to make sure that there's enough humidity in its surrounding area, and that you really watch out for spider mites during this time. When you water these plants, give them nice thorough waterings. When the plants are coming out of dormancy, you want to gradually increase the amount of waterings. Right now, this is peak growing season for Catasetums, so they really need a lot of water. And during this time, they get watered almost every day, every other day in my climate, and I just make sure that it never dries out at this period of time. As we head towards dormancy, which tends to be in the fall season, you want to taper down your waterings so that you gradually decrease the amount of moisture in the root system. That way, you prevent root rot issues or any other problems that may occur by stressing out the plant. Catasetums grow really fast in a really short amount of time, so fertilizer is really important to Catasetums. Some people say that it can take up to 1,000 ppm of a fertilizer, but a safe range would be around 300 to 500 if you're unsure about how much to use. I use NutriCoat slow release fertilizer. I use the full strength that is recommended, and so far I'm seeing great growth with that. The best times to repot this plant is sometime after the plants have become dormant, if you're going to store them away for the winter season, and also right when it emerges from dormancy. So when you see new growth starts and before the roots fully emerge, that would be the best time to repot these plants. You don't want to disturb the roots during its active growing season because you don't want to damage the root system. And because it grows so fast in such a short amount of time, any damage can set it back. Of course, if you need to repot these plants or uppot them at any point in time, just be really careful about the root system and I'm sure you'll be fine. So that is the general care requirements for Catasetums. And as you dive into this genus, you'll start to notice nuances between different species or hybrids, and you can cater it to your specific needs. For me, Catasetums tend to be fairly low maintenance plants. For about 6 months of the year, they're dormant, so you don't really need to do anything to them. You might need to mist them every once in a while if they look really shriveled, but on the whole, they don't require a lot of care. During the growing season, there's really two main periods of time where you need to be watchful, and that's when it emerges from dormancy and when it starts to go into dormancy. Those transitions tend to cause the most amount of problems for me, but other than that, it's not too bad. And the other issue that I have is in the summer, it gets really hot and really dry here. And the heat is not a problem for these plants, but the dryness is, and they are really susceptible to spider mites. So as soon as I start seeing spider mites, I really try to treat it as quickly as possible because I don't want it to spread to other plants and I don't want to set back this plant. So for treating spider mites, I rub the surface of the leaves with rubbing alcohol. And then I spray to rinse off any residuals. Then I spray it with a miticide to make sure that no mites can come back. I definitely try to boost the humidity as much as possible and keep these plants well watered to prevent that issue. I noticed that this year I put a portion of my plants in a humidity tent and a portion that is just outdoors, subject to the elements. And the ones in the humidity tent definitely have no issue with spider mites, but the ones outdoors, of course, it gets a little bit drier. So it has a couple of spider mite issues, but a lot less than last year. And I think that's because I'm keeping these plants as healthy as possible so that they're less stressed. Now, I keep mentioning these kind of transition periods between going into dormancy and coming out of dormancy. And that is basically when the plant is starting its new growth for the season, and also when the new growth matures, it's starting to lose its leaves at the end of the season and become a dormant bulb. These 2 points are very important because the root system is vulnerable, and it's probably at its most vulnerable. When it's coming out of dormancy, the roots have been shriveled and dried for about 6 months or so, and so it's not ready to uptake a full watering, and that's why you want to wait until the new growth has about 3 inches of roots so that it can uptake that water. And you want to start gradually because those new roots are also not accustomed to getting any moisture at all, so it's searching and spreading out to create as much space so I can absorb moisture really quickly. So you just gradually want to increase waterings for the new root system to grow, and then once it gets pretty established, you can just give it full waterings and just can keep it completely hydrated and moist throughout the growing season. As it tapers off into fall and it's starting to lose its leaves, you just want to slowly taper down the waterings as well to signal to the plant to start withholding water, and you just don't want it to get rot. Also, if the temperature starts to dip really quickly, it's better to back off watering than to just give it its regular scheduled watering. I noticed that as the temperatures cool down, the roots stay wet longer and it doesn't absorb as quickly, and so that can be a potential for getting rot issues. So that is a quick overview of taking care of Catasetums and some tips and tricks that I've learned along the way. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel to follow along on my orchid journey. I hope you all are staying safe and staying cool, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!